Evan, hello. Hello, everyone. Where's the garlic? Probably should know where the garlic is. Alrighty. There's the garlic. Cool. Let's make some fried rice. All right, hello everyone. My name is Wesley. This is Bookmark. Today we're doing a Thai basil fried rice that is going to lean very heavily on two ingredients that make it Thai, which will be Thai basil and Thai chilies, both of which are just about like the two most iconic things that you can put in a fried rice to make it Thai. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. I don't know everything about fried rice, but I actually do, in this case, know a lot about fried rice because I have made a lot of fried rice now. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. The fried rice that we're doing today, first of all, comes from a recipe that came over on my YouTube channel, which came out last Friday. That recipe is based off of the recipe that we use to make the fried rice at our pop-up, which is also called Woo Can Cook. At that pop-up, we do a couple of things that are slightly different because we're cooking at a really high volume. But before it was served in the pop-up, when we were serving 300 bowls a day or something, this is the recipe that I had written, which is what that original recipe was based off of, and sort of like scaled up to as we sort of built the large volume recipe out. So if you have any questions, hit me up and let me know what you think. As always, if you're looking for those recipes, they live over on my YouTube channel. So if you're on Reddit, it's the YouTube channel at the bottom. Those are always fun places to start. We have new recipes. They're out every Friday. And then we've got the short recipes out every Monday. And then new music that comes out every Wednesday on the channel. So lots of cool shit coming. Cool. So if you're following along with me today, I am, as I've done in the last couple of streams too, I'm doubling the recipe right now because I'm cooking a batch for my neighbor as well as for myself. So if you're following along, what you should be doing is halving everything that I'm cooking today. Which, by the way, that reminds me, if you're watching on Reddit, over on YouTube, there's all the streams that are coming out, I think, for the next like month or so. And that's also where there's a whole list of ingredients that go with each stream. So if you want to, you can pick up ingredients and cook along with me, which is always super fun. And lots of people have started doing, which is really cool. And then we can kind of compare how our fried rices came out. So we'll take a look, all that stuff. Right, so right now I'm chopping up, this is going to be 8 cloves, or if you're following the recipe, 4 cloves of garlic, which I'm crushing and mincing. And then next we're going to do about 2 inches of ginger, which we're going to finely mince. Or if you're following the recipe, that should be 1 inch of ginger. Today, by the way, I actually meant to do this with leftover rice, but today we're going to do it with fresh rice, and I'm going to explain how to do that, which common misnomer. Lots of people think that you can't make fried rice with fresh rice, and I have actually said in some videos too that you can't make fried rice without leftover rice, that it must be leftover, you can't use fresh rice. I have actually found that is actually untrue, and I will explain how to do that in a minute. So I actually meant to do it with leftover rice, and then I realized that I don't have enough leftover rice. So today we're going to do it with fresh rice, or at least some leftover rice and then some leftover rice. And I will explain how that works. But essentially what we're going to do is address a couple of the issues that come with fresh rice, mostly being that fresh rice is very fluffy and moist. Has lots of moisture that lives in it, which means that if you try and cook it, so if you put really fluffy fresh rice into a wok, that's going to essentially add a whole bunch of water to the wok, which is not going to be really good for your stir fry. You're essentially just going to start losing a lot of heat really rapidly, and then you end up with basically porridge fried rice, which is not good. That's always gross. So what we're going to do with our rice today is we're going to treat it in order to keep it from turning into rice porridge, basically by removing a bunch of moisture from it using cornstarch, and then breaking down a lot of those large clumps, which is the second big problem that comes with fresh rice. All right, might be a little bit too much ginger. We'll see. Next up, this is going to be, which is going to be about 2 tablespoons of ginger. This might be too much. I'm going to strip some of this off. Yeah, it looks better. Next up, this is going to be 2 tablespoons of ginger, or if you're following the recipe, 1 tablespoon of ginger. We're going to peel with the side of a spoon and then fine mince. What are we making today? Yeah, hello if you're just tuning in. Today we're doing a Thai basil fried rice that's going to lean very heavily on 2 ingredients in order to make it Thai. Fried rice, as you can imagine, because it's such a simple concept, occurs throughout a lot of different Asian cuisines, including but not limited to Chinese food and Thai food. So the way that we're going to approach it, more or less like a Chinese fried rice, because that's how I have made all food. That's how I learned how to cook, was cooking Chinese food. But then we're going to deviate a little bit and kind of dive into like a couple of things that will make it Thai, mainly the use of Thai basil and Thai chili. But otherwise, though, it is still going to be assembled in a wok, very similar to the way that you would assemble a fried rice in Chinese cooking. And probably how you would cook it in Thai cooking, too. Yeah. This is a lot of ginger, so this just reminded me. If you're doing a lot of ginger and you don't feel like doing all this chopping, what you can do is you can also throw this into a food processor, which is really useful. That's actually how we prep for the pop-ups when we're doing really large volumes. You can toss this into a food processor. It's honestly going to get you a better mince anyway. I personally don't get the food processor out unless I absolutely have to, because it's a lot of work to try and clean that thing afterwards, and you have to figure out what to do with the blade after you clean it and dry it and all that shit. So for me personally, I never take that food processor out unless I have to. But if you don't like doing high volumes of chopping, you can get that processor out. It will be probably a better mince, actually. Or if you really don't want to, you can also get a microplane out. And microplane ginger, that's another good shortcut. This might be too much ginger. I think I might have overshot on ginger. I probably should have waited. Yeah, it'll be alright. Alright, so that's our ginger. Whether or not that took longer or shorter than it would have taken for me to clean and dry, I'm not actually sure. But for what it's worth, if you don't like doing this, you can absolutely toss this into a food processor. So, let's see. Next up, I'm going to throw in a couple of root veggies. Actually, just one root veggie. Actually, let's do our Thai chilies first. Excuse me while I dive back and forth, but today we're going to use some Thai chilies. What I like to say is, as I have like sort of scaled this recipe, what I'm looking for is about 1 Thai chili per bowl of rice. So today I'm doing 4 servings, actually 5 servings of fried rice, so I'm going to do 5 Thai chilies. That might seem like a lot, but as you sort of scale the recipe and cook more, you're also going to need more chilies, so keep that in mind. What we're going to do here, so a Thai chili is obviously, it's very small, so it's not going to add a lot of like dense starch to your recipe or anything, but what it really does is it adds this nice Thai heat that's sort of like the iconic heat that you'll recognize from basically all Thai food that is spicy. It's going to be coming from the bird's eye chili or the Thai chili, depending on who you ask. So what I always say, I personally think that there is no reason to destem or de-seed a Thai chili in the same way that you might have a reason to destem a jalapeno, for example. because you can get something out of a jalapeno even if it doesn't have its seeds. Personally, for me, if you're going to eat a Thai chili, you might as well leave the seeds in. If you're not going to eat, if you don't want it to be spicy, then leave the chilies out entirely. But that's a personal opinion. So that said, I have never really gone about bothering de-seeding a Thai chili because there's not really any point. But that said, though, a Thai chili is, relatively speaking, a pretty spicy one. So if you're averse to Thai chili, or if you're averse to heat, this is the part that I would dial up or down. What we're doing right now is about 1 chili per bowl. So dial that up or down depending on your preference. You could use less, you could use more. Make a choice for yourself. So there's our chilies. All right. Next up, I'm going to do a bunch of carrots because these are really tiny carrots, which I am kind of upset about. If you're using good carrots, you want them to be larger than this. This is really annoying. It's not going to make that much of a difference in terms of like quality of taste, but the fact that these carrots are really small mean that we're going to have to chop a lot of carrots, or at the very least, we're going to have to peel a lot of carrots, which is a little bit annoying. So, if you're cooking for a large party, I personally would go out of my way to look for larger carrots so that I don't have to peel and chop a whole bunch of carrots, because this is annoying. So what I'm doing here first is I'm starting off by chopping off this tiny bit, so this part where it's tapering really aggressively. This is the part that goes into the dirt. That part is, especially when it's aggressively tapering like that, that's essentially inedible. It's going to be really, really bitter. So I like to remove it, and then I also like to remove the core end, or the root end, so that we can get this nice stable grounding here. And then once your carrot is nice and stable, then we can go through and peel. And if you had a larger carrot, this part would go much faster. But since we're using 6 very tiny carrots, we have to go through and peel 6 very tiny carrots, which is annoying. What type of knives do I use? Yeah, good question. Lots of people ask about this knife. This knife is it's a French chef's knife. It's made by a company called Pernod Nogent. If you're looking for something similar, I found this really, really randomly and luckily at an estate sale. If you're looking for something similar, I would probably not try and look for this knife because it's really obscure, and I have looked for it myself and have never actually found one. I think I found one on eBay that was unnecessarily expensive. So if you're looking for something similar, I personally would go more out of my way to look for a sabatier, which is still like actively in production, so you can still find that stuff. And since it's actively in production, you can find it for pretty cheap. You could probably get a good sabatier for like maybe 100, 150 bucks or something. So, whereas this knife, I think I saw it on eBay for like $500 or something, and it's a cool knife, but it's not worth $500. It might be worth like 200, 300 bucks. So that feels like unnecessary. It feels like you're just paying for the fact that it's an obscure knife. So, personally, if I was looking for a French chef's knife that was similar to this, I would look for a sabatier. And I actually own a sabatier too, which is cool. They're essentially the same knife. All right. So what I'm doing here, I'm starting off, actually I should have started off by sorting my carrots by size here. I like to do this a lot. It's sort of a little bit OCD, but I actually think that it helps quite a bit in chopping in the correct way because it helps us pay a little bit more attention to like the way that we're chopping, so we know basically the way that we need to like address the taper of the carrot. So as you can see, the larger end of the carrot lives up here, the smaller end lives down here, and as we get to those larger bits of carrot, we're going to start chopping it slightly differently so we can pay attention to making sure that we get this nice even chop. If you're not paying attention, especially if you start tuning out and like just sort of like get in the zone of chopping, you could easily end up with an uneven dice. And carrots are actually really important to make sure that you have an even dice on, because you could very easily end up with an uneven dice because of the taper, and then if you have an uneven dice, then you'll also have an uneven cook, which is going to be tragic with a carrot because it will basically just be raw. So right now we're making our way through. These are the smaller taped ends of the carrot. This is also maybe too much carrot. We'll find out. Which means that I'm essentially chopping it in half and then into quarters, like so, and then dicing. This, by the way, I would also be a strong advocate for frozen carrots, frozen and pre-diced carrots. I think that they're really cost-effective, and they are also, you won't be able to tell the difference between a frozen pre-diced carrot and fresh carrot like we're using right now. And in fact, it is also pretty commonly, well, at least for me, commonly preferred to use frozen peas, carrots, and veggies anytime that you're making fried rice. And the reason for that being is because when you use frozen carrots, essentially what you're doing is throwing them into the wok raw, and then you use that their frozen qualities to sort of essentially cook on residual heat. So you're going to throw it in at the very, very end. If they were raw today, if they were frozen today, we're using fresh carrots, so we actually have to cook these. But when they're frozen, you're essentially going to throw them in at the very, very end and let that residual heat kind of defrost them. Then you'll end up with this nice crispy veggie. As opposed to if you use, like, say, a canned pea or a canned corn, then you would end up with more of a mushy pea, which is not what we're after. So as we sort of like get into the larger bits of the carrot, you'll notice that I'm starting to slice it into thirds here, and that is to address the wider taper of the carrot, which is very useful if you are sorting by size. So go the extra mile, sort it by size. Cool. This is a lot of carrot. This might be more carrot than we need. We'll see. I keep saying that, but actually maybe it's not. Alright, so that's our carrot. Let's set these aside. Since these are not frozen carrots, since these are fresh carrots, we're actually going to toss these in fairly early in our wok fry, and that's just to sort of like cook them through so we don't have a raw carrot in our wok as we serve them. All right, what are we doing next? Let's do this basil. All right, so next up, this might be, I personally think, maybe the most important ingredient in this whole dish. This is going to be some Thai basil, which is about, I think, a single ounce worth of Thai basil. What we're going to do is destem them first, so we're going to remove it from this leafy stem. With some stuff, you will see me using a fork to destem. I actually don't think that works with Thai basil, so you actually have to go through and pull it off, which is a little bit annoying. But I also think that this is maybe the most iconic thing that you can put in a Thai dish is Thai basil. It's like a little bit rich or brighter, more of a licorice quality to it that we're looking for from Thai food, that you'll find in a lot of Thai food. So things like pad ki mao and pad gra prao, or what do they call that? Thai basil chicken, is that what they call that? Or Thai basil pork, something like that. Stuff like that, you'll find a lot of Thai basil there floating around. Most iconically, if you were to find this in Thailand, if you were actually to get iconic, like authentic Thai food, you would see the use of holy basil, which I actually here in California have never even come across. I have never even seen it, and I've found that that's actually a pretty common experience because Thai basil, holy basil, obviously is very perishable, which means that if it doesn't grow here, which it doesn't, you're not going to find it. So I have actually never come across holy basil, but if there is anybody that lives in Oakland and knows where to find holy basil, please tell me. Cool. Yeah, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to de-stem this. Very important. This is actually really important with Thai basil. You also want to make sure and wash this stuff. I am not a strong advocate for washing all of your veggies, although I do personally wash all of my veggies. If you don't want to wash some of your veggies, that's fine. If you don't want to wash your carrots, for example, or like your onions or stuff like that, that's all totally fine. With really leafy stuff like this, you definitely want to wash this. Not for the fact that there's germs on it, but because you'll probably find like ants and bugs, flies, roaches. Sometimes I've come across like slugs a lot and stuff like this. So you want to, at the very least, run it under some water to make sure that there's no slugs and like weird insects and stuff hanging around. It's all of those things are okay. It's a sign that it was grown somewhere fresh. But if you do find living organisms in there, you want to make sure that that stuff doesn't also head into your food. Unless you like that, go for it. There we go. So I'm giving this just a quick rinse. I should probably use a strainer, but I don't feel like it. And that is going to do it for our Thai basil. Last thing? Yeah, I think this is the last veggie. The last thing that I'm going to chop up here, this is going to be some lime wedges, which we're going to use as a nice garnish. I had done it, or I had chopped these up for the recipe video, and then I forgot to put them in the rice, so I ended up not using it, but I actually think that a lime is going to go really nicely. So I'm going to chop up some quarters, and then we're going to toss these in at the very, very end. That's probably, of the Thai things that you can throw into a recipe, that's probably the third most iconic Thai thing. That or fish sauce, which we're also going to use. All right, next up we're going to do some eggs. We're going to whisk these up, and they're going to head into the wok real early, and we're going to be able to get some nice set eggs, and we'll have these big curds of scrambled eggs. Today, I have a lot of leftover eggs, so I'm going to use a large amount of eggs because I have never regretted throwing too many eggs into a fried rice. So for yourself, I think for the original recipe, I think I did something like 3 eggs for a serving of like 4. What I like to say is we're looking for about an egg, 1 and 1.5 eggs per fried rice. Today I'm using 8 eggs for 4 servings, which is a lot of eggs. That's a lot of eggs, but I'm trying to use some eggs up. These are going to expire soon, so that's why I'm using them. All right. For our eggs, I like to use a very, very simple combination of things. Fried egg. I think that there's 2 things that you can throw into a fried egg, or into a wok fried egg, that's going to be a real nice complement. The first is going to be a single tablespoon of Shaoxing wine. It's going to give us like a little bit of brightness. Then a pinch of salt, just like any scrambled egg. I think I saw a Kenji Lopez thing that explained this nicely, but essentially, that it's, first of all, you always want to salt your eggs because eggs need salt. That's very simple. But the second of all, what we also want to do is you want to add the salt to the eggs and then kind of let it sit for a little bit, maybe like 10 minutes. And that's going to keep the eggs from sort of coagulating, and then you'll get like, if you've ever come across like really runny or like stringy eggs, that's how you prevent that, is with a little bit of salt. But also salt your eggs. Your eggs always need salt. It's basic fact. All right, so last up, second to last, well, last thing to chop. This is going to be what I believe is 4 chicken thighs. Is that right? Yeah, 4 chicken thighs. There's our rice. This is going to be 4 chicken thighs. We're going to slice into small dice, or like a medium dice here. You could also use chicken breast too if you don't have chicken thigh. I personally don't find that it makes that much of a difference. So sometimes I am picky about what type of chicken to use. In the case of a fried rice, I don't think that it's going to make much of a difference. The main difference being that chicken thigh comes from obviously the thigh of the chicken, which means that it has dark meat. It also means that it has a little bit more fat than a chicken breast. And I also will say is that I find, as I have used chicken a lot, that they tend to inject more water into a chicken breast, which is how they charge more money for chicken. So I think that you get more bang for your buck if you go for chicken thigh. But I will also say there are certain recipes that specifically call for chicken breast too. So, because that chicken thigh has more water injected into it, you also essentially are basically buying water because the chicken is charged per pound, which is really obnoxious. Cool. So this today is going to be, this is, I believe, 4 chicken thighs. All right, there's our chicken thigh. Let's clean up this cutting board. We're gonna do a really simple marinade for our chicken today. Mostly because I actually don't think that the chicken needs a whole lot because there's already a lot of stuff going on in the fried rice itself. Probably also partially be because I couldn't think of anything to do with the marinade when I wrote this recipe, so here we are. All right, so for our chicken, we're gonna do, this is gonna be, if you're following the recipe, should be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce. Today I'm going to do, this is probably closer to 6. Somebody asked me at one point if I double the marinades when I double recipes. I found that you technically don't need to because really our goal is to just make sure that everything is nice and coated. As long as the marinade is submerging the chicken, that's really what we're after. We don't necessarily have to use a quarter or half a cup of soy sauce here if we don't need to. So that was half a teaspoon of white pepper, and then finally rounding this out, I almost forgot, is going to be the same quantity of cornstarch. And that's essentially just going to coat the chicken in a little bit of cornstarch to keep it from overcooking when we go and do our wok fry sear. All right, so that's our chicken. Running out of counter space. So last up, we're going to assemble our sauce element, which is maybe the thing that sets this aside from other fried rices. Is you generally wouldn't see a sauce element incorporated into a fried rice, which personally I think is what makes a lot of fried rices really bland, because it's essentially just rice with a bunch of other like proteins, which can be kind of boring. So I like to add a little bit of sauce to our fried rices for the pop-ups. So we're going to start off, it's going to look a little bit like a Chinese fried rice. That should be 4 tablespoons. Today I'm doubling, so 8 tablespoons or half a cup of soy sauce to start. And then next will be 2 tablespoons of sesame oil. Those both are very Chinese things to use in the fried rice. But then what we're going to do is start rounding things out with a couple of tablespoons of oyster sauce. That's going to give us some nice malted, rich, and like earthy umami qualities. Looks good. Oh, thank you. So far, yeah. That's the best we can hope for. So this is going to be what should be 2 tablespoons. Today I'm doubling, so this is 4 tablespoons of oyster sauce. Another very Chinese thing, too, for what it's worth. But I also love pairing oyster sauce with fish sauce because I think it kind of mellows out the fishiness a little bit without like compromising those fishy qualities that we're looking for. So that's 3 tablespoons of fish sauce, or 6 tablespoons in our case today, because again we are doubling. And then finally, rounding this all out, I'm going to add just a little bit of lime. I don't think that was in the original recipe, but I think it's going to work nicely. We're adding a little bit. All right, and yeah. Our sauce. So last up, probably the hardest part of making fried rice in my experience, and I have made a lot of fried rice. I think I'm coming up on 10,000 bowls of fried rice now. I'm not exaggerating, 10,000. Today, the hardest part about making fried rice is the rice, because rice is very, very challenging. This is leftover rice, which makes it a little bit easier because it's going to break down properly. However, this is not enough rice for what we're making today. So in addition to that leftover rice, we also have fresh rice, which poses many problems. You will probably have heard people say that you can't make fried rice using fresh rice because it has all of this moisture in it. And if rice has a lot of moisture in it, when you go to cook it, it's also going to add moisture to your cook, which is, if you've ever worked with a wok before, that is the #1 thing that you have to avoid when wok cooking, is adding moisture to the wok cook in your stir fry, because as you add more moisture, it's going to bring down the temperature of the wok, and as you get a lower temperature wok, that's how you get into the world of undercooked and like soggy fried rice, which is never ever a good thing. So where's my sheet tray? Let's start with the scale first. So in order to make this work for our benefit, this took a lot of trial and error in order to get right. I'm going to do a couple of things. The first thing that we're going to do is, first thing that we're going to do is weigh out the right amount of rice. But the next thing we're going to do is coat it in a little bit of cornstarch. And that's going to keep, sort of like absorb a lot of the moisture of the fried rice, of the rice, so that as it heads into the wok, you don't end up with a lot of really damp fried rice. So I have a sheet tray here. We're going to weigh out. What I'm looking for is about 8 ounces of rice per serving. So this is definitely going to fog the lens up. All right, so there's our rice. We're laying this out on a sheet tray. I like to weigh that out by ounce. Man, I hope this lens unfogs. I like to lay this out on a sheet tray so that we don't overshoot on the rice. If you're using leftover rice, you'll probably just use whatever rice is in your rice pot. And that can get a little bit misleading if you're not careful. Then what I'm going to do is dust this with a little bit of cornstarch. Sort of like powdered sugar. And what's going to happen is this cornstarch is going to start eating up or like absorbing a lot of the residual moisture that's sort of off-gassing as it sort of steams. So I'm doing two things right now with my bench scraper here. The first, obviously, is what we're doing is folding in that cornstarch, but also secondly, what we're doing is I'm going after all of these large clumps, so stuff like that. We want to break that stuff up before it gets into the wok. Otherwise, it's not going to come apart as it cooks, and then you'll have clumpy fried rice, which is another terrible thing that we don't want. All right. So there's our rice. Again, probably the hardest part about making fried rice is getting the rice right. And let's do some cooking. All right. So I'm getting my wok going here. We're going to heat this up as hot as possible, and then we'll get cooking some rice here. And you'll notice that as we start cooking, this is going to start coming together very quickly. So the rest of this stir fry will probably happen in about 10 minutes, maybe. Evan, have I ever tried mixing Chinese and Mexican cuisine? All the time. Actually, one of the things that we do in our pop-up is a fried rice burrito, where we essentially like take the fried rices that we make in the pop-up and then top it with a cilantro crema and a pickled shallot, and then wrap it in a burrito tortilla, which is really good. Lots of people are skeptical about it at first, but once you have it, you will be convinced that it is the best burrito that you will ever had. We also did like a miso glazed salmon taco, which was really, really good. And then I've done like a couple other things that I can't remember right now. But there's actually a whole series that's on the YouTube channel that's dedicated to like Chinese fusion cuisine, which has been really fun and sort of like just stealing weird things or random and iconic things from other cuisines and seeing what happens if we use them in a Chinese wok fried context, which is really weird and cool and fun and sometimes terrible. All right. So once our wok is nice and hot, I'm going to add, this is going to be grapeseed oil. I think we're using grapeseed oil today. Lots of people ask what kind of oil I'm using. Usually if we're wok frying, I'm generally going to be using peanut oil if I'm wok frying today, and more recently as of the last couple of months. I think I ran out of peanut oil a while back, and then I just never got around to buying more peanut oil. So more lately I've been cooking with grapeseed oil, which is what I use for most like general cooking, I think. So I'm adding my chicken in here. I should be doing this one piece at a time. I started doing it and then I decided that I don't feel like taking that much time. If you're really dedicated, you could do this one piece at a time, and it is definitely going to get you the best possible sear. I just don't feel like taking the time to do that right now, so I'm adding it a couple pieces at a time. But really our goal is to make sure that our chicken has nice, good, solid contact with the surface area of the wok. And the reason for that is that if you have chicken that's sitting on top of other chicken, sort of like that, that's not going to sear. That's just going to steam, and then so the more stacking that happens like that, the more steamed chicken that you will have, and the less crispy chicken that you'll have, which is what we're after here. That's our end goal. So we're gonna let that sear. I like to go for 2.5 minutes. And that means 2.5 minutes, do not move it. If you move anything in the wok while it's searing, it is going to ruin the sear, and then you won't have seared chicken. You just have burnt chicken. The only movement that I advocate for when searing things in a round bottom wok, specifically like this one, is to give the wok a little bit of swirl, like so. And that is essentially just moving the cooking oil around a little bit. Which tends to be a problem with round bottom woks because all of that oil is going to sort of end up at the bottom where the wok rounds out, which means the stuff at the top over here is not going to actually get any oil, and that is also going to end up burning. As the sear continues, it will get a little bit easier to navigate because that chicken fat is going to start rendering, and you'll have a little bit more fats to sort of move around. Cool, so I'm gonna let that go. We're looking for 2.5 minutes, probably gonna go for closer to 3 minutes. The reason that I say we're gonna go for closer to 3 minutes is because I'm noticing that the wok is losing a little bit of heat. Maybe you can hear it, you probably can't hear it. But if you notice that the wok isn't quite sizzling as aggressively as you want it to, that probably means that you're losing heat, which is okay, it's not the end of the world. You just need to stop moving it a little bit, and it will start retaining a little bit more heat. So that's one of those like more of a sixth sense thing that you sort of develop over time as you sort of like start to understand your wok and also understand your wok burner, or your stove range in this case. But I would like that to be burning a little bit hotter, so I'm going to stop moving it. I wish this camera was positioned a little bit better. That's a little bit better. All right, let's go for a little bit of wok. Nope. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Wok is really hard to do on a home range because the flames don't really kick up high enough. So I found maybe 1 in 3 times it works. Nope, that is not going to work for me. I think we just have too much chicken in the wok right now. So, this is like also a very common issue that I run into with fried rice, especially on home range fried rice, is that because fried rice involves so many things going into the wok, that I often run into heat retention issues. So batch cooking is going to be really important for home cooking fried rice because you're probably not going to have enough heat to do everything at once. So if we were cooking on the wok burners that we usually cook on for the pop-ups, where we're cooking on 250,000 BTUs of fire, it's not a problem, but for us at home, we're going to pull stuff out, and that's just going to help us retain a little bit more heat for in the wok as we sort of cook, so we don't end up cooking on medium heat, which is bad. We don't want to do that. The one caveat to cooking in batches means that as we cook, we're also going to have to add more cooking oil. So as we start cooking in more batches, we want to pay attention to how much cooking oil we're actually adding to the wok. Because if you're not careful, you'll end up with a overly oiled wok cook. And that's when people start complaining that your food is too oily, which is technically true. So I'm adding a little bit more cooking oil. That's just like maybe a single tablespoon or so. And that's just to get things moving a little bit so that we may cook our eggs next. But before we do that though, because we're about to cook, this is going to be 8 eggs in a wok, which means that we're going to need quite a bit of heat in order for these eggs to cook properly. Because what we want here are scrambled eggs. So if we don't want we need that wok to be pretty hot. If you want soft scrambled eggs, that can be over medium to medium low heat. For us today though, what we're looking for is nice big egg curds. So in order to make sure that all of these eggs cook properly, we want this wok to be pretty hot. So you'll notice, like I mentioned, we're heading into soft scrambled egg territory because our wok is not heating up properly, because that's just so many eggs. So I'm going to stop agitating it. We're going to let that reheat, let the wok come back up to temperature, and then we may finish scrambling our eggs. If we were to continue scrambling here though, that would end up giving us soft scrambled eggs. Like so, that's what we're looking for. So that's more what we're looking for here, is these nice set eggs, big curds of egg. That's what we're after here. Otherwise, those are going to just sort of crumple into the wok fry, which is not what we're going for. And now finally we can do a bit of batch cooking here. So I'm adding maybe another single tablespoon of cooking oil. Then here's our aromatics going in there, followed by my ginger. I am going to cut some of this ginger out. And our Thai chilies. Those Thai chilies, by the way, they do contain capsaicin, as any pepper does. So before you add them into the wok, make sure your windows are nice and wide open, and you should try and have an overhead fan if you've got one on too. And that will sort of remove a lot of that capsaicin from the air, but essentially what you're releasing into the air right now is pepper spray, so be careful. Make sure those windows are open or you're going to have a real coughing fit coming. Right, there's my carrots going in. There's my chicken. We're going to go ahead and start adding things back to the wok now. There's our chicken, and finally here's our rice going in. And at this point, once that rice gets into the wok, things are going to start cooling down very quickly. But that's okay because we're not cooking anymore. We're really just tossing things to combine. So this is essentially a mixing bowl now. So at this point, I like going with an overhand grip. This is going to help us break up some of these clumps. Thought we lost the carrot. And finally, last up, this is going to be our sauce element. Oh, second to last, I should say. We generally want to start adding that sauce element in batches, maybe a quarter, half a cup at a time, and that's just going to make sure that we don't overdo it and end up with an over-seasoned fried rice, which is never what we're after here. Finally, here's our Thai basil going in. At this point, everything is really pretty much cooked here. What we're doing right now is just sort of letting those Thai basil leaves sort of release their aromatic qualities. Once they start wilting, we'll know we're pretty much ready to go here. Here's all the food for you. Yeah, today we're cooking for my neighbors today, who are getting half of this. The other half is for me. But yes, that is the reason why we're doubling the recipe. This. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Add a little bit more sauce and that's going to do it. The audience gets a taste. Yeah, I wish. I wish I could send you all food. So last thing that we want to do anytime that we're cooking in carbon steel, I say this pretty much every time we finish cooking. Give your wok a nice clean. It's very useful because as the wok cools down, it's going to lose its that nice non-stick surface that comes from doing that nice long yao and all that good stuff that we did in order to ensure this nice non-stick surface. So clean it while it's hot, and you will have a lot less work to do. Once it's cooled down, you're going to have to do a lot more scrubbing, and it's going to be way harder to clean. And I've also found causes issue with the patina over time too. So what I like to do, clean it while it's hot, then throw it back on the fire and just give it a little bit of time to cook off some of this residual water. Nope. Let's turn the camera on. There we go. So I think in the original recipe I had originally used a cilantro garnish, which I totally forgot and did not buy any cilantro, so we don't have garnish today. But I did remember to do these limes, which is going to be nice. And it's going to give us a little bit of extra brightness. And that's going to do it. Full disclosure, I'm going to put some chopsticks on here for the nice presentation, but I am 100% going to eat this with a spoon. Because it's faster. Why would you eat this with chopsticks? Cool. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST with new recipes out on the YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday was the recipe for this Thai fried rice, which comes from, this is the recipe that we use, well, roughly the recipe that we use for the fried rice, the Thai fried rice that we serve in our pop-up. So if you're here in Oakland, come find us. We're at Federation Brewing this coming Friday. Following Friday after that is going to be Novel Brewing, and then I forget where else. But every Friday we're popping up somewhere. Last Friday we were at Oakland First Friday. We're there every first Friday now, and lots of other places too. So if you're here in the Bay Area and you have the ability to come find us, please do. We have a lot of different fun fried rices and other stuff like that coming out. If you're not here though, find us on the YouTube channel. That's a good place to start and get all of the recipes for the stuff, and you can make it yourself, because I honestly don't think that this one is that difficult. There are definitely things that come up in the YouTube series that I think are too difficult for most people to even try. But I actually think that this is a relatively approachable recipe with relatively findable ingredients too, which is you can't necessarily say about a lot of the things that we've made. But I actually think that this is a doable recipe. So let me know if you try it, post some pictures, use the subreddit, which is really cool. r/WooCanCook, lots of cool shit. Lots of photos of people posting over there, which is always really fun. I love seeing photos of other people cooking the food. Cool. Let's see, this Friday coming up next is going to be Vietnamese fried chicken, which is going to be really tasty and delicious. I'm super stoked for that. And then I forget what we're cooking after that. Dajamin? I think we're doing dajamin. Did we already do that? I forget what's coming up after that. So lots of stuff coming up every Friday, new recipes. Every Monday is going to be the short recipes where we post the gift recipes, which if you're following from gift recipes, that's where those live. And then, yeah, lots of cool stuff coming. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Tastes like strawberries on a summer evening, and it sounds just like a song. I want more berries and that summer on a summer evening. Baby, you're the end of June. I want your belly and that summer feeling, getting washed away in you. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without watermelon sugar high, 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 watermelon sugar high. I just wanna taste ya, I just wanna taste ya, watermelon sugar high.
It bothers me and I'm feeling unhappy. I just try and think of nice things when I'm happy. Well, let me see. Nice things. Daffodils. Green meadows. Raindrops on roses. Whiskers on kittens. Cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels. Doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles. Wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes. Snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes. Silver white winters that melt into springs. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
Well, good for you, I guess you moved on really easily. You found a new girl and it only took a couple weeks. Remember when you said that you wanted to give me the world? And good for you, I guess that you've been working on yourself. I guess the therapist I found for you, she really helped. Now you can be a better man for your brand new girl. Well, good for you, you look happy and healthy. Not me, if you ever cared to ask. Good for you, you're doing great out there without me, baby. Gotta wish that I could do that. I've lost my mind, I've spent the night crying on the floor of my bedroom. But you're so affected, I really don't get it. But I guess good for you.
Smooth like butter, like a criminal undercover. Don't pop like trouble, breaking into your heart like that. Cool shade stunner, yeah, I owe it all to my mother. Hot like summer, yeah, I'm making you sweat like that. Ooh, when I look in the mirror, I'm not too hard to do. I got the superstar glow, so to the boogie line. A step right left to my beat. I like the moon right with me, baby. Know that I got that heat. Let me show you can't stop your shit. Side step right left to my beat. Can't let it flow.
Closed off from love, I didn't need the pain. Once or twice was enough, and it was all in vain. Time starts to pass before you know it. Try